Good afternoon and welcome. Let's take a look at our top story. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has landed in Washington, D.C. ahead of his UN address and the Quad meet. Upon his arrival at the airport, he was received by U.S. Department of State officials and India's ambassador to the U.S. The Prime Minister stepped out of his motorcade to interact with the diaspora waiting at the airport. A crowd of ecstatic Indian Americans arrived at the Joint Base Andrews to welcome the popular leader. Despite heavy rains, they were seen chanting his name and waving the Indian flag.
I'm here to see my beloved Prime Minister, Mr. Modi. We are so excited. We don't mind staying in the rain. We are just excited to see him and welcome him. Modi we love you, Modi ji.
I am so honored and proud to be here to welcome the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji. Cannot wait for stronger ties between the United States and India on the whole.
I'm here to greet Mr. Modi ji, and this is my fourth time coming here and greeting him. But kind of overall, we are looking forward to his arrival and his speech at UN. We are looking at what he's going to talk about. And since he had become Prime Minister, India had progressed last, and Indo-American relationship had improved, and that's what we want to continue.
In a tweet, the Prime Minister thanked the Indian community for their warm welcome. He commended the Indian diaspora for having distinguished itself across the world. The next few days will be packed with multiple engagements, meetings, and an address at the United Nations General Assembly. This is Modi's seventh visit to the U.S. since he became Prime Minister in 2014. WION is in Washington, D.C. with the biggest team on the ground. We are tracking each and every development of the 76th UNGA session, as well as Prime Minister Modi's first post-pandemic overseas visit. Before leaving for the U.S., the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "The occasion is going to strengthen India's strategic partnership with the U.S., and India will consolidate ties with Japan and Australia." Now let's give you a quick roundup of how the coming days will look like. On Thursday, he has a crucial bilateral meeting scheduled with Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga and Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Now, he's also going to sit down with the U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris. This is on the backdrop of the AUKUS Pact, which has miffed the European Union. Friday will be a crucial day for the Prime Minister and India's strategic relationship with the U.S. Prime Minister Modi is going to hold a bilateral meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden. Sources say that Afghanistan and issues related to South Asia will be discussed during the meeting. Now, this will be Prime Minister Modi's first in-person meet with Biden after the U.S. president took office in January. The two have interacted several times virtually and over a phone call, but this is the first face-to-face meeting since Biden won the presidential elections. Now, later that day, Prime Minister Modi will take part in the Quad's first in-person summit. Quadrilateral Security Dialogue Partnership includes India, the United States, Australia, and Japan. The leaders are set to review the progress made in the first virtual summit that was held in March of this year. Sources say that the Quad conversation will revolve around a number of issues of common interest. Discussions on China could be a priority, according to sources. In New York, the Prime Minister will be addressing the general debate, which will cover a range of issues from reinforcing strategic partnerships, recovery from COVID-19, rebuilding sustainability, the climate crisis, curbing extremism and cross-border terror, to revitalizing the United Nations. For more on this, we are being joined by Andrew Whitehead, who is a writer and has worked with BBC as a senior journalist. Thank you for joining us on WION. Now, with the focus on the Indo-Pacific and bolstering ties among Asian countries with the West, What is India expected to gain after the Quad summit and the UN General Assembly?
Well, I think Narendra Modi will be able to establish a personal relationship with Joe Biden, which is really important. He got on very well with Donald Trump, but American politics have changed, and they've changed very markedly. But I think also the first in-person summit of the Quad will be a deciding moment about how important this initiative is going to be and whether its main focus is going to be security, which means sort of ramping up against a more assertive China in the light of what's been happening in Hong Kong and the sense of threat to Taiwan, or whether it'll be more of a talking shop. And of course, we've also had the AUKUS announced in the last couple of weeks, the security relationship between the United States, the United Kingdom and Australia. And that really, in a sense, the timing of that is a little peculiar because, of course, Australia and the United States make up half of the Quad. So what about the other half of the Quad, Japan and India? Do they feel a little bit relegated to the margins? And I think we'll get a greater sense of that over the coming couple of days as well.
Right. Now, there is worry that with China and Pakistan cozying up to the Taliban government, that it could destabilize India's security status. Do you think this concern could be included as a point of discussion in the Quad meeting by Prime Minister Modi?
I'm fairly sure that Prime Minister Modi will raise this either in his one-on-one meeting with President Biden or in the Quad. Whether the Quad is going to take cognizance of this sort of issue is not clear. But I'd have thought that India's, I think, very real security concerns about what the return of the Taliban to dominance in Afghanistan means for regional security and means also for issues such as Kashmir, I think that is a live concern, which I'm sure will be mentioned in some way in the bilateral meeting with President Biden.
Right. And Andrew, you did talk about the AUKUS, a new security pact. It's been signed between the United States, the United Kingdom and Australia. Now, it's largely being seen as an effort to contain China's influence in the South China Sea region. How do you see its impact on Quad?
I'm not sure. I mean, AUKUS came out of almost nowhere. As you mentioned in the introduction, it gravely offended particularly the French government because they lost a very large submarine deal with Australia and a security understanding with Australia. And it does seem to have taken many of America's allies by surprise. And I'd be surprised if Delhi was in the loop about what was in prospect. I may be wrong, but I'd be surprised if that was the case. And I would imagine that Narendra Modi and his team will be wanting to get a sense of how much AUKUS limits the ambitions of the Quad, or whether indeed the two are parallel tracks, one of which will help to support the other. But at the moment, I just don't think we know.
Right. Now, with China having emerged as somewhat of a common concern for both India and the United States, how do you see the governments of the two nations working together to face this challenge? What are or could be the expectations out of the bilateral between Modi and Biden?
I think really a basic understanding. I don't think that there is a precise list of issues or demands that the two will settle on. And I don't think there's any particular shopping list that I'm aware of on either the American or the Indian side as regards China. But I'm sure that they'll be sharing notes. I'm sure that the issues of Ladakh and Hong Kong and Taiwan will all come up, as will Afghanistan, and links between China and Pakistan. And I think it will be a matter of establishing a dialogue, which means there's an easier understanding and exchange of views between Washington and Delhi.
Right. Just to take that a little bit further, the other global crisis that is happening on India's doorsteps is, of course, in Afghanistan. What can we expect on that front when Biden and Modi meet?
Well, I think it's going to be rather limited. I mean, the method by which the Americans withdrew from Afghanistan has been the most calamitous decision of Joe Biden's presidency. It has affected him in the opinion polls in the US, and it has gravely affected his international standing. And I think Mr. Modi will find a way of expressing India's concern about that. Whether the United States will look to India to help in some ways to maintain links with a Taliban-ruled Afghanistan, I'm not sure. I think it's going to be very difficult indeed for India to do that. I mean, clearly, Pakistan foreign policy has won a key success with the return to power of the Taliban. And basically, when Pakistan does well in regional foreign policy, then India suffers. And I think that's where we are.
Right, Andrew, thank you very much for being with us on this broadcast.
WION, now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.